Hello there and welcome to another TCG R&D, and today we're going to be taking a look at a comparison of draw systems in customizable card games. So this is a good way of just doing a little bit of research. If you're starting your own homemade TCG, we can dive into this and we're going to see what type of draw system should your card game have. Okay, since Magic the Gathering's release in 1993, there have been hundreds of customizable card games covering different ideas, mechanics and themes. The genres has gone far beyond its humble origins and grown increasingly diverse. And I think one of the most interesting examples of this growth is the way different games handle card draw. So, draw 1 or 2 cards per turn, used by Magic the Gathering, Hearthstone, Versus System, Pokemon TCG, Yu-Gi-Oh! And many others. So we've got a lot of the big hitters there, you know. So you've got Magic the Gathering, Hearthstone, like pretty big online. We've got Pokemon, obviously, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Which used to be like the biggest at one time. It's not still, is it? It's got to be Pokemon now, isn't it? Every time I search TCGs, Pokemon always comes up. It has to be Pokemon. Okay, so the original system is the simplest of them all, and at the beginning of your turn you draw 1 or 2 cards. That's it. It does its job of providing new cards and is easy to design for. However, it's not without its flaws. The biggest problem with drawing a set number of cards is that if you don't get the right ones, you can't do anything. You might need resources, troops, or a way to get rid of threat, but if the game doesn't give them to you, there's nothing you can do. This leads to one-sided games where one player can't put up a fight. So drawing only a few cards per turn also makes them very expensive. After all, if one is all you get per turn, it's better to be a good one. This forces all cards to be either highly versatile or very impactful to be playable. Cards that are useful only in some situations become a luxury players can't afford. Deck variety goes down and efficiency becomes paramount. This is true. You see this in a lot of TCGs now, where you need 3-4 copies of that card. You can't just have one of each individual card. You have to have like lots and lots of the same card so you have a better chance of getting that card because it's a useful card. You see it all the time. So a typical game of Magic, for example, may end or hit in its critical point by turn 4. This means that players see about a dozen cards and win through a handful of them. If you only play 6 spells in a game, you don't have room for that many effects or that many lines of play for that matter. So while its simplicity and high level of randomness have kept the system popular, other systems have been developed to try and address its many shortcomings. So what we have in Shard, I'll give that as an example, right? So we started off with, you have a resource system first of all. So you gain 1 Shard and 5 mana. Your mana always recharges, but you slowly, you gain a Shard at a time. And it's like you're tapping into your soul and you can't extract too much or it'll kill you. So you get a soul shard, 1 soul shard. 5 mana, right? So your mana recharges. Now you could spend that mana to draw cards as well, so you can draw up to 5 per turn, but then you don't have the mana to cast spells after that. So that's the downfall. So a lot of people will just draw 2, maybe 3 if they want to cast a smaller spell. So we've done that for a long time, and then we introduced, which will be another system that we'll go through here, we introduced the system of drawing back up to 5. So you get your free draws up to 5, and then if you want to draw excess of that, you can then spend mana as well. So we still have both systems in place, which is nice because you get your free draws, you've got your hand power, and if you've drawn what you need, then you've got 5 mana to cast big spells. But being able to draw that excess as well, it gives players a lot of versatility. A lot of people will draw that 1 extra one and still have 4 mana to spend, so that's like 2 level spells, or like a nice 3 and 1 mana spell. So you get some choices, you know. So draw as cards are played. Okay, this is a system used by Vampire the Eternal Struggle. Whenever you play a card, you draw a card. Simple. Okay, right. So yeah, so as soon as I play a card, so it's replenishing your hand as soon as you use it. Fine. It's fairly unique design, which I don't think has ever been replicated, but which was highly influential. Okay, yeah, I mean, that's a good one, actually. You know, I've never even thought of that. Play a card, draw a card. Done. I imagine you can't have a system where you're attacking your opponent's hand, because if you attack your opponent's hand, they can't play their card, which means if you attack their hand enough, they've got nothing in the hand. Unless you add a rule like that whenever a card just leaves your hand, you get to draw. But then there's no incentive to attack your opponent's hand, because your opponent is just going to replenish, unless you know your opponent has something good in their hand. Also, you can't have return to hand card plays, because then you permanently boost your opponent's hand size as well. So there are limitations with this system as well, because yeah, the things that you can do to annoy your opponent, go, oh, I return that creature to your hand. You can't do that now, because you've just boosted your opponent's hand size permanently. That's not good. But this easy replacement makes cards too cheap. There's not much of a cost to playing a card when you can instantly replace it with another. Often the real cost is not so much the resources you spend to put into play, but simply having it on your hand, taking up space. In fact, one of the flaws of the vampire game, VTES, is how often it develops into players throwing cards at each other, and the draw system is one of its causes. Yeah, I suppose it speeds up play, isn't it? Because you don't see it as that much of a cost. So you could see that as an advantage as well. But I also see what they mean. I mean, if your cards are cheap, you're going to play more cards. If you're going to play more cards, the game's going to be faster. And you don't want games to drag out too long, or people get bored. This is worded the way I like it. So easy access to cards also distorts balance. When the main cost of a card is having them in your hand, it becomes very difficult to price them, right? So yeah, it's costing you to leave it in your hand. You need to play it. So every card has to be valuable in that case. You know, you can't have any dud cards where I'm just going to leave that in my hand. That's no good. Why play an expensive card when you can simply play 5 or 6 cheap cards in its place? This is true. So it forces you to play the cheaper cards, because then you get more draw power and you can filter through your deck faster to get the desired cards. And then when that part of the game comes into play, when you need those, you already have them at the ready. The cost of playing one card over another becomes very hard to control, being either too high or too low depending on how fast you can place it. So the way the system shoves cards into the player's face also goes against one of their strengths of card games, which is their small rules footprint. Drawing more cards means reading more of them and having to stop mid-turn to do slow down on the game. Oh, so it actually slows down the gameplay. I was saying you're playing more cards, so you progress in the gameplay and it's going to speed it up. But yeah, because you're constantly receiving new cards, it's going to slow down because you have to read them, analyze, and then play again. So yeah, it actually slows down gameplay. Oh, that feels... yeah, that's genius. Alright, sorry, so I didn't realize I didn't F11, so we've had that ugly bar at the top there. I've got rid of it now. Let's get back to the video. Draw up to hand size at the end of your turn. So this is what I was talking about with Shard. We introduced this into it later. So the system used by Vampire the Eternal Struggle had clear benefits, but also a rather large number of flaws. Hence the several designers, including Richard Garfield himself, also Richard Garfield, designer of Magic the Gathering, actually made this as well. Okay, worked to improve it. So the best of these tweaks was drawing up to the hand size. That is, instead of drawing a card the exact moment you play another, you only draw them at the end of the turn and only up to a certain number. So this is good. Yeah, so this way you don't have as much to play during your turn. You've only got like the maximum of 5 as an example, because it says here on the video. But you can, at the end of your turn, that means that you're drawing, and while your opponent is strategizing, if they're taking some time, you can take time to read and get used to those cards so you're ready for your next turn. So this will speed up the system. you're not going to be filtering through quite as many cards, because theoretically you could just keep going depending on how your resource system works. You could keep going by playing cards and then keep drawing with the previous strategy. In this one, you can play up to a maximum of 5. So this still gives players easy access to cards, but there's now a ceiling to how many of them they can obtain. If the maximum hand size is 4, players can only draw 4 cards per turn. If it's 6, then they can only draw 6. This keeps things in check and players no longer throw cards at each other with such ease. Once again, with this, I would say it does falter the systems I was talking about before. So if I had a card that returned a card to your hand, it would increase the maximum card size, which I suppose limits what they can draw next turn. If they play some cards, they don't get to draw as many. So that could still be an advantage. Okay, so you could use that one. Oh yeah, the other thing is it wouldn't permanently increase your hand size if the rules are draw to a maximum of this. So it actually fixes those 2 flaws that I pointed out earlier. So perhaps this is why Keyforge has so many additional mechanisms to keep the game in check. Your deck is composed of 3 suits, and you can only play or activate cards of one of those suits each turn. While you may be able to play your whole hand once in a while, it's not possible to do it every turn. Hand management is needed. Okay, so the next draw system is draw as a resource. So this is used by Legends of Five Rings and Star Wars CCG. But what if draw didn't require playing cards? Many of the issues found in other systems could be avoided if drawing cards and actually playing them were separate concepts. This led to a series of games where cards are drawn by spending another resource like money or life points. The main benefit of this system is that you don't need cards to draw. No matter what you have in your hand, you always have the option of getting cards. You may also have nothing and still have options, but unlike the other systems, these cards come at a cost. There is, however, the potential for a feedback loop. Having more resources often means getting more cards, and getting more cards often means having more resources. Okay, so even worse, having fewer resources means getting less cards, dragging players down if they make a mistake. Okay, so yeah, you start to get this disparity when you're playing somebody who's starting to gain more resources starts to obtain more cards, and then it's just snowball effect. So what I call it's the monopoly effect. The person who owns the most resources is able to gather more resources because they have the resources to gather resources, if that makes sense. You know, in Monopoly they have no catch-up mechanic. You know, and this is something I want to address in a future video as well. I want to address catch-up mechanics. I want to go through different types of catch-up mechanics. That's going to be another Talk TCG in the future. If that's something you're interested in, make sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and that video will be available in the future. Right, so hence games using this kind of system tend to have mechanisms to compensate. For example, in Legends of the Five Rings LCG, players bid a resource called Honor, which doubles as life points. Players draw 1 card for each point of honor spent, but the loser gets the difference between the 2 bids. Therefore, a player drawing too many cards will also help his opponent. That's interesting. So you got life points that you can also spend as a resource. How about what if you have a TCG where you start off with like a very few amount of life points, and then you have to maybe like spend your cards to like gain the life points, but then they actually do double up as a resource as well. So you're not just looking at like 20 life points and they slowly go down. Both players naturally have this, they start like in the middle, and you can kind of build, maybe cap it as well, just so you prevent runaway. This will be another catch-up mechanic, I suppose. And you can see the game go where there maybe there's a system where they taper right at the bottom. That could be an interesting concept for a TCG right there. The addition of a resource system also increases the complexity of the game. Knowing how much to pay for cards, when and why is difficult and less approachable than previous solutions. Games using this system are harder on players but also gain in depth. This is something I've learned as well from developing Shard, definitely. definitely. The resource systems do add a little bit of complexity. There are just more moving parts in general. And if you imagine it as a physical card game, you have to carry tokens as well as the cards. You know, you can't just take your deck of cards around. So draw as an auction. This is the next one. So this is used by Netrunner, which is Android Netrunner. This is something I've looked at recently because it's a discontinued game, but it had some interesting mechanics. So Netrunner's resource system is in many ways the logical conclusion of the analysis presented on this page. It combines the lessons learned from all the other systems and synthesizes them into a clean rule set. Well, they've bigged it up. Bring it home. So players have a set amount of actions per turn which they can spend. Drawing a card costs 1 action, the same as getting 1 credit or making a run, the central mechanic of the game. So on 1 turn, you might draw a card, get 2 credits, and then make a run. You have the freedom to choose. Like the previous system, the greatest benefit is that it completely separates card draw from the cards themselves. The most important difference is that actions are self-balancing in a way that other resources aren't. The more actions a player spends drawing, the fewer actions he has to build an economy to attack his opponent. It's a very elegant system. So yeah, it's similar to like Shard then. You had the set amount of mana and then you would draw based off that. But we did add cards that did have draw power as well, because they were important in the sense of actually getting more of an advantage for a certain element. Of course, as they would normally be like a low mana cost, but then would cost something else on top of it. You know, there'd normally be an additional cost, whether that would be, I'm thinking of random examples, so I'm just making it up. It might be maybe you sacrifice the top few cards of your deck to then draw the next few cards. It could be you draw so many cards and then discard them that way by viewing them. It could be that you sacrifice a creature on the field to draw a card. So they start taking other resources elsewhere to exchange for that resource, rather than just, oh, I've got this card, it costs me 1 mana to draw it, then I play 1 mana to play it, and then I get to draw 2 cards. That's just a way of milling your deck. Okay, so that was my little example anyway. Okay, so the last sentence, and it flows well. It doesn't flood the player with options because they only see new cards when they want to. Card balance is easy because you can compare costs. It limits how hard a player can win and always leaves the opponent a vector of attack. Hands down, it's the best card draw system I've ever seen in a game. Okay, right, it's cool. So that's what they think. I mean, yes, I can see that, and I mean, if I can completely agree with it. And of course, that would be me being biased because it is quite similar to Shard TCG and how their draw system is. So you know, it's the best system in the game. Great, yeah, because it limits how much you can do on the field as well. Of course, we've got 2 resource systems, and 1 resource system for creatures and the other resource creatures for spells. So ours isn't exactly the same, but it does have those similarities. For me, I would say if I was trying a new draw system, I mean, the draw by resource is similar to this, the draw by actions. If you've only got a set amount, like this way you have to accumulate resources, yeah, by playing the cards. This one is you get a set amount of actions. So probably the actions, yeah, I'm just gonna say it, right? I quite like the system. There's a reason we went that way. This I like too, though. This is why we also incorporated this. So you always got the set amount of cards, but then you can subtract how much you play in a game for additional cards as well, but it wasn't essential, so you were allowed to play the game freely if you had the cards in your hand. So I actually we've combined 2 of these together. Now, would there be a way to combine another 2 of these together? Could you draw by resources and just get 1 free card per turn? Could you draw by resources with the max? Yes. Like these you can combine together. You know, you don't just have to pick one. You could pick more than one. Though you are adding perhaps more complexity. When, if you think about if you're a new player, you go, okay, how's the draw system work? And you go, well, it works like this. But then you also get this. The also parts, when you're trying to take in all the information at once, the also part just means there's just that extra baggage, you know. So maybe try to stick to one, but I would say there was a problem with two. The draw by committing an action, I don't think that was done, right? The draw by resource, yeah. So that was by resource, right? So I want to address another one, which is in the Digimon TCG, which I've been playing a lot of recently. The Digimon TCG have you get to draw your card at the start of the turn. So we have this one up here at the top. There we go. So the draw 1 or 2 cards per turn. So you get to draw 1 card, but then if you ever digivolve a Digimon, you get to draw a card. So you're incentivized to digivolve up fast as well. So you go, well, if I digivolve, I get to draw a card. So I'll do that. Well, you're also spending resources as well. So it's rewarding you for digivolving. So if you've got a system where you're digivolving a lot, then yeah, you get to draw more cards. So that's another way. So you can digivolve by a certain action in your game. That is also something you could look into for your own homemade TCG. But thank you very much for watching this video. If you've liked it, don't forget to hit that like button, because it really helps me out and it helps other people out as well who want to find and discover this video. And of course, don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this, especially for that future video now that I've just thought about it. All right, hope to see you guys next time. Goodbye.